All right, thanks, Alois. Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Conahan, ACRL's Manager of Professional Development. Thanks for joining us today for the first webinar offered as part of ACRL's Together Wherever virtual event. Our goal for this week is to bring our colleagues together to discuss ways to best meet the needs of the library community during this uncertain time and beyond. We appreciate you all being here with us today. If you like, feel free to pop a brief introduction and say hello in the chat while I go over a few reminders. You can use the chat during the session to submit questions or comments. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout and will moderate questions at the end of the session. As Alois mentioned, today's session is being recorded. We'll post the link to the recording on the ACRL Together Wherever website in about a business day or so you can watch for the recording there. The ALA Statement of Appropriate Conduct applies to all ACRL events, including virtual, and we encourage respectful discourse on Twitter using the hashtag ACRLTogether2020. Today's presentation will be an hour, and we'll leave the Zoom room open for an additional 15 to 20 minutes after the presentation for optional additional networking and question time. And when you depart the webinar today, you'll see a brief evaluation. We appreciate you spending just a few moments to complete the evaluation and share your thoughts and feedback. Okay, I think we're ready now. Today's webcast is Empowering Student Workers Using Flipped and Agile Project Management. I'd like to thank our presenter, Jen Staten, for being with us today. Jen, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. It is an honor to be with you all here today and to kick off this ACRL webinar series. My name is Jen Staten, and I am the Student Engagement Librarian at the University of North Texas Libraries. And today I'm going to talk to you about some ideas and techniques and some project management methods that I've employed both as my time as student engagement librarian and in other roles throughout the library. I'll start by telling you a little bit more about working with students at UNT. So the University of North Texas is a large school with a diverse student body, and the library is one of the largest employers of students on campus, with 260 part-time student assistants and 13 graduate student assistants, as well as an undetermined number of full-time staff and librarians that may also be pursuing degrees. So these numbers, of course, may not be accurate due to recent events, but I still manage 6 of our 13 graduate student assistants, called GSAs, as part of the Research and Engagement Unit for Access Services. So as a student engagement librarian, I collaborate with our academic partners in the Writing and Learning Centers. I work closely with programs like TRIO to support students' research needs and connect them to library services. The Research and Engagement Unit has become a critical part of how I'm able to do this across campus. It's my privilege to directly supervise these 6 GSAs, and our primary duties within the unit are providing reference services for the library. So they do this, well, they have and will do this again at a face-to-face service point, our main library services desk. But the ASCA service is also provided through a growing number of virtual methods to better provide reference and research support to both our campus and our online students. The GSAs are also a critical part of our tiered service at the service desk and of our virtual support for all of our services. And additionally, they participate in a number of outreach and instruction activities, not only, as I mentioned, with me in the course of my engagement activities as a subject librarian, but also with subject librarians and others throughout the library and university campus. Some projects that we've been able to facilitate on our own using some of the methods that I'll talk about today. And this is just mostly projects that we've either done or expanded in the past year. They have worked on creating an embedded peer tutoring program that embedded them as tutors in our academic services building and in the honors dorm. And then they've also provided research support through a number of self-created tabling events and other activities across campus. They have created and expanded their own research blog called ScholarSpeak that features posts on a number of research topics and seeks contributors from students that are library employees. They've also been instrumental in helping us to revamp our student assistant training program and help us create peer-to-peer training models that have been duplicated throughout our department. Most recently, since they've been working from home, they've refocused their efforts to focusing on staff development, and they're currently developing a series of sessions that will actually help staff to develop some of the higher level research skills that they use as GSAs, as well as helping us with a little program I'm calling internal engagement, which is where we're turning that outreach that we normally send outward and bring it back to the employees and to the student assistants within the library. They're also helping us create a data management plan for our reference and information service data, as well as visualization projects around that. And then finally, I really think that this is so much in large part to empowering students that they have been so essential in just the critical planning and emergency response of these past few months. When we had to reimagine our services and chop up our policies and figure out how we were still going to be able to provide resources, the GSAs, I think because we had instilled those leadership qualities, because we had focused on empowering them, were ready to meet that challenge. They had ideas to bring to the table. So we've definitely benefited from empowering our students through project work, and I hope that at least some of these ideas that I share today you will also find useful. So here's some ideas that I've had for empowerment that have led me to change my project management style and help guide me towards practices that really engage and empower students. So first of all, our student workers are valued library employees. That means that they deserve the same respect as our staff and librarians. We really do them a disservice when we dumb down projects for them and just put them in positions where we're asking them to be live bodies in chairs. I hope that all of us are challenging our student workers to become library users, to learn the value of a library, not only within its context for them as students, but also to become lifelong library users. And we absolutely have the ability to do that through student work. We can't always promote our student workers. We can't always offer them full-time positions once they graduate, but we can definitely provide them with career building opportunities if we value them as colleagues. So my argument is for respect, my argument is for collegiality, regardless of whether it's their first job or their first library job or their first job on campus. So the second idea that I'd like to share is that students are individuals. Not only should we be valuing their diversity as a student body, we should be seeking out those unique skills and ideas that they can contribute to our workplace. It is of benefit to us that we don't exclusively hire library students to work in the library. Even my team of GSAs, even though they come from the College of Library or come from the College of Information, are in library and information science programs, they don't have monolithic interest in academic libraries. Not all of them plan to be librarians. I've got some data scientists, and all of our students have unique backgrounds. They have unique education levels, and they definitely have things to bring to our projects that we cannot provide to our projects. And it's important that we acknowledge that and recognize that. So next, Engagement energizes our projects, and this is so important because we need to realize that, guess what? Students need the same motivation, resources, support, and acknowledgement that we need to be inspired to do our projects and to sustain our projects. Projects are easier when everyone working on the project knows why they're there and what they hope to accomplish. It's very important that, again, even if we're not if the library is not the career that they're seeking, that they're still finding as much value in the work for themselves as we're finding in it for our library and for our activities. So that leadership is learned. Project management roles really can help students to develop as professionals. They can help them discover new interests, new career paths, new research interests. It can help them to pursue scholarly and research goals and help build their confidence in their ability, not only as workers, but as scholars. So it should be our goal to make every student position a student position that can create a leader and that can create a lifelong library ally. And finally, we must earn and keep their trust. Has a nice ring to it, but it's so essential. Supervisors, we have to be willing to become mentors. We're not going to be able to entrust them with projects and empower them to do things unless we're willing to increase our communication, increase our flexibility and our empathy. We have to learn more skills as supervisors in order to help them learn more skills as project leaders. We have to advocate for their needs in this process, and this is very important. As we ask them to do more, we need to make sure that they know they can push back. We need to make sure that they know they can fail. And that's just a very key part of both flipped and agile project management, is that there is room for discovery, is that there is room for people to be able to to restart a project and to figure things out as they go along. So I wish that I could claim these ideas sprang like Venus fully formed from my head here, but they are actually inspired largely by my own experiences as a student worker in the library and elsewhere in academia. And I first found the language to articulate empowerment through the Digital Frontiers organization and the practitioner community of digital humanities folks that I found there. So a major influence on my project management philosophy has been the Student Collaborators Bill of Rights. Hopefully some of y'all have heard about this, but basically, what the Student Collaborators Bill of Rights says, several years ago, UCLA DH created these basic principles in a blog post, and while their primary audience was professors that might accept the practice of disguising student labor as a class project, their ideas really extend to also paid projects where students may perform only basic or repetitive tasks. So student work is paid. And again, that role should have value. It shouldn't just be data entry. They should be helping us build that spreadsheet and telling us what we're going to do with that data. Student work is paid kind of seems obvious for those of us that have hourly student work teams, but if you're like me and are now managing remote student workers, it is important that we make sure that they're not checking their emails off the clock, and that they're not, that all those notifications are dark, so that we can still establish that work-life balance for them. Students always are going to have more plates spinning in the air at a time because they're always going to have class as well. So anything that we're putting into the mix as far as work needs to occur within work hours. This gets challenging when we talk about flipped, but I'll go over that here in just a moment. So secondly, the students have the right to claim their work and use their work. Again, students should feel free to be able to pursue scholarship around the projects that we create for them, which means that we have to create projects that they can utilize their scholarship and utilize their research interests for. That's on us. Once we do that, once we have them fully collaborating with us and not just doing the busy work of our projects, then they don't have to seek our permission to go present a poster on that, or create a presentation, or even write an article about that. The projects that they do at work should inspire them to do things in their own field of study. And even if it's just an academic poster symposium, I really feel that there is value to our student workers becoming that beacon for other students and describing the type of things that they're able to do in the library. That has a real chain effect. So again, a high level of mentorship isn't expected for internships. And I would argue that all of our student positions can and should be treated as internships. We are teaching them how to be professionals, even if we're not teaching them how to have a career in the library. Finally, student collaboration is a mutually beneficial process. Just take a second with that. Mutually beneficial, not they're doing the work for us, not, oh, we're helping them and teaching them so much stuff. Really, collaboration is a two-way street, and it flows, ebbs and flows back and forth from the seasoned scholar and the student. And that is the relationship that we're really seeking to build with our students. And that's why we're trying these new management techniques. So first I want to talk about flipped classrooms and how we go about flipping projects for students in class. So for those of you that aren't familiar with flipped classroom management, basically we take the the instructor's part, which may be giving a lecture, and then the class activity, and then the homework, and we reverse that whole process. So the process begins with independent learning. The process begins with in a classroom setting, students going off to read things, or perhaps write an introductory paper before they come to the project. Then that class activity in the flipped process more becomes the how are you going to take this stuff that you figured out on your own and apply it to a problem that we set before you, as usually as a group. The instructor role becomes one of focusing that reflection, and becomes one of redirecting that work that the students have done on their own. So it's commonly referred to the you do, we do, I do. And with flipped assignments, the important thing about them is when they get to that we do, it's often hands-on, and the focus always has some aspect of content inquiry and analysis. And I think that even if we have students from diverse fields of study, we can foster the skills that they may need to contribute to projects by first putting this piece of let's learn about this, and then together we're going to discover and analyze how this is going to happen. One of the key things about flipping classrooms is that failure is built in. Failure is expected, failure is encouraged, because it's through productive failure that we assemble knowledge through problem solving. And these guys that I've cited here, many others that I'm happy to provide as resources, have cited again and again how this process of learning through problem solving gives us a deeper understanding and a more solid base to then build other types of knowledge on top of. So engaged learning is probably the most widely cited positive aspect of using this method in classrooms. If you want students to engage with a topic that perhaps they're not familiar with, or a topic that's outside of their interest, this is a way to build that engagement, because it's almost as if it organically becomes their idea. And that this learning, again, is something that they've created for themselves. It's not something that we've handed to them. So when we translate this to flipping projects for work, obviously, again, we don't want them working off the clock. So no homework means that we take time to create projects that already pair with the learning objectives that we hope to have. So if we want students to learn more about research in the library, the first step of our project is teaching them about library research. The first step of our project is encouraging them to go off and build that independent knowledge base and maybe do some study on the clock, maybe do some independent activities on the clock before they come to their project role. Again, that we do has to create a safe space for failure, and that's not an easy thing to do in the workplace. If students are told you're not going to be graded on this assignment, that is a signal to them that it's okay if we don't get this right the first time. We don't have any mechanism like that in our workplace, and so it's up to us as, again, those mentors and supervisors to create that safe space. For those students to be like, I'm going to try to do something I've never done before, and if it doesn't work out, I've got a timeline I can adjust, I've got project members that I can talk to, I've got ways that I can work through this and problem solve. So the other thing that's different with work is that I do part doesn't always come at the end of your project. And this is where Agile starts to come into play. But that I do part as a supervisor, as a mentor, it may happen spontaneously at any stage of that project. So you may find yourself as a supervisor needing to redirect because you see the project going in a direction and you know that maybe you're not going to be able to reach all of the objectives if it continues in that way. But that being said, it's a gentle touch. It is a light touch. You still want them to essentially waste some time and essentially fail a few times so that they can build a better mousetrap after a few mice escape. Your role as instructor is in many ways equal to the role of mentor when you flip your projects at work. However, as I mentioned, it doesn't replace the role of supervisor. You still absolutely need to wear your supervisor hat sometimes, but what it can do is it can supersede that role. So supervision is still part of your management equation, but you're that mentor first. And you're the one that's willing to negotiate your deadlines and your project management structure so that they have the ability to learn and grow within the project and become your project leaders. So finally, flipping students at work does absolutely have the same effect as flipping projects in the classroom in that it engages your student workers. As they build expertise, the effort that you put in creating well-organized flip projects can really empower them to become those collaborators that you need them to be. And can really empower them to, again, bring that expertise and those skills from wherever their research interest and their academic backgrounds lie to the table in surprising ways. So let's talk about how Agile may work into this. So like flip design, Agile is not a management technique that we might think is native to the library. At first glance, it seems like it is very specific to the workflow of software development, and that's often because it's so frequently described in those terms. So Agile's been around for a while, but in case it's new to you, keep in mind that it is about principles and values more than techniques. So the principles and values of Agile are that, I'm sorry, I might be getting a little distracted by the chat. I do want to offer an example of a flipped work project here for Danielle. She asked, do you have examples of how you flipped work projects? I'm trying to get my head around it. And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page before we move on to Agile there. So Danielle, an example of a flipped project I would give you would be the research blog that the GSAs created. So what I asked them to do, I was like, I want you to create a blog that shares some of the stuff that you're sharing with students every day through the Ask Us service in a blog format that's going to give you practice writing scholarly things. So consider it practice for writing articles, but first, before you create this blog, you're going to have to go and figure out what best practices for scholarly blogs are. I'm going to need you to figure out what good design in a scholarly blog looks like and create a report for me about what good design in a blog was. So I basically asked them to create a design brief for their blog and to have sections that, told me how they were going to address accessibility and how they were going to, address common issues that like we see in blogs and websites, frankly. And then once they had kind of created all of that on their own, then we got to the we do part. Then we got to the part where they actually were assigned roles of either blog administrator or editor or supporting roles as our outreach coordinator. So, okay, good. I'm glad that's helping. So my part really didn't come in until they started posting. And then once they started posting, I was like, okay, but we need to, do images like this. And have you thought about, writing posts around these kinds of topics? So again, I'm redirecting, I'm adjusting, I'm not coming up with the content, I'm not coming up with the direction of that project, but I'm there to help guide it, and I'm there for them to be a soundboard as they encounter problems, and then also to identify some of those problems. So, all right, so that being said, I want to move back into Agile here and talk about the Agile Manifesto. So I think for those of you that are new to the concept of Agile, this is kind of a good, easy introduction to it. So they definitely, on their website, I encourage you to go check out the Agile Alliance. They have more resources about their values and practices of Agile. But basically, Agile is a project management design that values interactions and individuals over the processes and tools that you may use to facilitate those interactions. In software, for them, it means that the working software is valued over the documentation that may support that that software. So basically, your ends justify your means, and it can get messy. It can get as messy as it needs to be, so long as that end project is clean and we're all happy with it. Customer collaboration is valued over contract negotiation. For those of you that don't have a tech background and haven't worked in web development, you work very closely with your customer. And so in libraries, we do too. Our customer is the student, right? So customer collaboration, you want to make sure that your end product is meeting their needs, even if their needs change. And so that leads you to this final point, which is, kind of the cornerstone of Agile project management, which is we respond to change over adhering to our plans. So again, while we value these things on the right, we value these things in bold on the left more. It's a system of priorities and values that help guide you quickly through the decision-making process and help you quickly put people where you need them to be in your projects. So I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like libraries. There's no genius bar in our computer lab, and most of us live for careful planning. But the library can be a surprisingly Agile-friendly environment when it wants to be. And this is because Agile, again, is not a structure or a formal methodology. You can take the pieces that work for you and leave the rest on the table. Agile is a set of practices, and it's just a way of organizing your people and prioritizing your communication. And if you keep those two things in mind, the Agile part of it really starts to come naturally, especially as your team members get more acclimated to Agile project management structures and more willing to take on new roles, change up their roles, and just kind of deal with that. Things may change at any moment, flow within your project. So Agile methodologies actually work really well in library environments and development environments because we have diversity of roles within our library, precisely because you may have student assistants, staff, and librarians working on a project. How many projects do we form a committee of people from across the library because we know that we need their input for this? That's what Agile does every time. Agile looks for the diversity in order to put the team together. If you have one person that is good at technology, and you have another person that is in media studies, and you have another person that's an English major, guess what? They're going to make a better training video than you ever could in your life, you know, because you've brought these people to the table, and with them and within their roles, they're able to excel, and they're not asked to be experts in everything. They're asked to build on the expertise that may already be in line with their interest. So Agile actually translates really easy into the library too, because our projects are often interdisciplinary. Sometimes we really benefit from having students that are science majors or math majors because we're trying to build resources for those students. Our students have a habit of being both the channel and the message. You know, they're both our creators and our audience. And so we really want to encourage them to bring that to the table when they come to our projects. And that's one of the things that Agile embraces wholeheartedly. That's not an obstacle for Agile. That's the way Agile likes to operate. So library change is constant, and Julie, yes, project creep is a constant threat, but how we manage that is we keep reflecting and we keep adapting. We are only doing those things that are going to move us towards our goal, even if our goal changes. It doesn't matter how many times Lucy moves the football, we go move to wherever she moved it to, and we keep on kicking. And that's what Agile really enables you to do. If, say, suddenly your face-to-face research services become virtual, knowing what your team members already possess in the way of skills really helps you to identify who's going to be the person that takes on that aspect of your new service, who's going to be the person that can most quickly develop this one thing that you need for this phase of your project. So what Agile's come to mean on my library team specifically, and what I think that it can mean on yours, is that still we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. My team used a shared drive, then we use SharePoint, now we use Microsoft Teams, and we will use whatever the next best tool is that suits our needs at the present time for the projects that we're undertaking at that moment. Knowledge acquisition and collaboration over success. It doesn't matter if every program we have succeeds. If they learn something, if that gives them ideas for better projects, if that means that the next time we go out and do that, they are more skilled as collaborators and they're more able to achieve that success, then guess what? We did succeed. And it's okay to let projects go when they don't succeed, so long as you do take that time to reflect and learn on them. Finally, student-centered design over organizational structures. Again, the students are our audience. Everything that we should do should be for the students. We can't value things like, we can't value things like maintaining certain things the way that they've always been, or making sure that that staff member doesn't have to do anything that they haven't done before. You can't be Agile if you're not willing to be flexible. And everyone in your organization, every member of your Agile library team has to be willing to put the students first. Even if they're students, they still have to keep student-centered design at the center of their design. Again, while we value everything here, we value those items on the left a little bit more. So how we've added Agile to the mix is I take a lot of time from the beginning to match expertise and interest and availability to the project. And when the projects change, I reevaluate all of that. It is more work for me. It absolutely is. As far as the structure, I don't have a lot to do with the structure. The students are determining the structure of their project and they're making those adjustments. That's why it's important that I'm doing that, facilitating that communication role. With time management, I've very quickly realized that fewer deadlines were important because they needed to know that that was up for negotiation too, that time was a resource just like everything else. So again, Agile has really helped us determine what success means for our team because it's provided us a means of measuring outcomes for things that aren't easily measured, and it gives us that time that we need to reflect and adjust and articulate not only our successes but also our failures. Agile's also led my team to be more sustainable because our good projects grow, our good projects get momentum and keep going, and the projects that don't succeed, we value them, but we don't invest in them. We keep moving forward. So how do I control this chaos? Well, it has to be structured enough to succeed. You can't just throw structure out the window. You do have to make sure that you're providing a framework that they can succeed within. So I do that basically by thinking about my projects in rounds. So the first round may involve, again, that investigation, that systematic kind of discovery that I want them to pursue on their own so that they know what I'm expecting them to bring to the table. And then I also set some very achievable goals. And within that round, I make sure that they know that they're supported to achieve those goals. I make sure that they know that they can negotiate those goals with me. But we're pursuing something that I think my team is capable of reaching in the set timeline. By round two, again, round two is reflection. We're taking those roles that we've been assigned and we're mastering them. We're creating that expertise within our team, and we're creating those leaders for the next round of our team, which may be refinement, maybe adjustment, maybe expansion, maybe a new project, or a different iteration of this project that doesn't even resemble round one. So round three then can focus on sustainability. So how, especially in student projects where you may have your project leaders graduating every other year, you know, if scaffolding is needed for sustainability, that's when you build in those training systems. If new goals are needed so that they constantly have something to work to and that creativity isn't lost in the project, then that's where you figure that out. As I've said many times throughout this presentation, time management and communication are so important. You cannot take for granted that your students are going to push back when they should. You need to set aside time for communication. You need to be the one making that ask and asking them if they have what they need, asking them if that deadline is still working for them, asking them where are they at and what are their goals, what problems are they solving, even if you're not willing to solve those problems for them. And I found a really effective way to do that is I build in reporting and time management into their roles. That is part of what they have to develop expertise in as they develop the expertise needed to become a leader on that project. I hold team members accountable for communicating with each other, not for communicating with me. When something breaks down in the project, my role is to ask, did you talk to so-and-so? Not to go and ask every team member what's going on. The time that I spend in building the project, I save in then having to manage the project as they learn to manage these projects themselves. It's important to establish timelines, even if you full well know those timelines are going to change. Once they realize that too, then you're able to really control that chaos a little bit better. And so finally, advocating for empowerment. You know, that is, this is how we control the chaos, is that it's not us controlling it, it's them controlling it. You have to create projects that utilize the skills and interests they already have. Whether that's social media, whether that's projects in your archives, there are such a range of activities and research. You can't tell me that in the academic library you don't have resources and services that don't need to appeal to every single student on campus. Find a way for that student that's working in your library to appeal to those students that they identify with, and create a project around that. Create a project that they can have ownership of, even if it's just creating materials for their fellow student assistants. There's many ways to empower your students, and once you empower them, that leads to other projects. You don't have to worry about creating projects, they come to you. So once you create leaders, you have to engage them honestly and set clear expectations for their roles. And then most importantly, you got to get out of the way. So once they know what they're doing, once they are solving problems and communicating with each other, both instructors in flipped classrooms and what we call Scrum Masters in Agile project management move their projects forward by letting them move forward at their own pace with the group. And it's not something that you're pulling the strings. It's not something that you're having to constantly manage. It's something that you step back and allow to happen. And so again, that doesn't always lead to successful projects, but that does always lead to empowered students. And that's my argument for trying these things. That's my argument for having these discussions. So I'd like to take a few minutes here, and I certainly encourage you, I will stay around as long as you need to ask me any questions that you like, but I'd like to ask you to tell me what's your team like, and have any of you used things that I'm describing here as flipped or agile techniques already on your team, either knowingly or unknowingly? So I see just there in the chat here, Jerry Ann says, so this is really more focused on graduate students rather than undergraduate. And I would like to say emphatically no. Though I'm utilizing these techniques with graduate students currently, I developed these management skills with undergraduate students. I developed these I had undergraduate students that I worked with both on digital projects, digital humanities projects, and then also on projects within the archives in my past position, and then also with students through things like summer internships and other things. So with these, again, it's important that we start with the students. So it doesn't matter what your student team looks like. You start with projects that work for the composition of your team and work from there. So would anyone like to share in chat what their team is like, or techniques that they've used? Okay, so Lucy says, okay, but we have books to pull, items to reshelve, items to circulate. How can these be inspiring? Yeah, I get it, Lucy. Not every aspect of our jobs is inspiring. Even as librarians, not everything we do is inspiring. Our projects, though, don't have to take all 20 hours of a student's work week. For my students, again, our three primary responsibilities are absolutely managing a service and managing a service desk. These are not project-based activities, but I've carved out at least 2 weeks, or sorry, at least 2 hours every week that they get to spend pursuing these projects. And a lot of the projects that we are able to do, we're able to accomplish them in spite of spending limited time on them because we're doing them together. So I'm not advocating that every library project becomes agile or becomes flipped, but I am advocating that we incorporate these types of projects into those other activities that we may not be able to make interesting and exciting. So whether that's something like training, whether that's something like creating exhibits and displays for those collections, or even, again, contributing to development plans when we look at redesigning those collections and redesigning those spaces. Students should be involved in collection management. They should be involved in every aspect of our library if our library is for them. So yeah, that's great. We've got students interested in customer service, students interested in media. Those are all definitely things that we can use. Students that are engaged in all kinds of research activities make great peer tutors and great peer researchers. I'm going to move on to my next question here. So let's talk about our students then. What is your library doing to encourage student professional development? And are there any life or library skills that you can be imparting through the projects that you're already doing? I'd like to challenge you to think about not only what projects you can make that are going to make sense for your students and engage your students, but also in that flipped learning part, in that independent learning part, what are we offering them that's going to make them better students? What are we offering them that's going to make them more able to use that database that their company pays for after graduation? It really doesn't matter what walk of life we're preparing them for if we build their leadership skills as we're doing these things, right? I love that. Heidi says we bring in career services office to talk to students about professional skills they're acquiring in the library job. Make those dots connect for them. That's really awesome. I think all of us have great ideas of how to do this stuff, and all of us have already been doing a lot of these flipped and agile things, whether or not we know what to call them, right? Oops, sorry. So that's all the questions that I had for you. I would like to take the rest of our time here together for any questions that you have for me, and just thank you all again for listening to what I had to say and for helping us kick off this ACRL webinar series.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. This is Margot again. And as people continue to add questions to the chat, I've tracked a few that have come in throughout your presentation. So I'll start with this question asking, are there any examples for undergrad students, what kind of projects they could be engaged in, and what should be the duration of the project, and how to determine deliverables?
So I think there is no one answer to at least some of those questions. There was a couple built into that. So I think I did give some examples of particularly undergraduate student projects, but for undergraduates too, I think we find more often that this may be their first job, period. And so we have a lot of opportunity to develop soft skills in that. So I think any project that involves soft skills like communication, time management, organization, anything like that that we can do, and especially I'm thinking for my undergraduate students, a lot of those were involved in outreach and instruction types of activities, either helping with like workshop style sessions or actually doing a part of an instruction session even. And then certainly, you know, the outreach things that we do and, you know, hopefully we'll do again, whether it's orientation or any of that, I think is a real opportunity for us to have students at that table with us and to not only have it be us that's telling students this is all the library stuff that we can do for you, but have our student workers become knowledgeable enough to be able to do that in a peer-to-peer way at those tables if we're not already doing that kind of stuff.
Great, thank you. Here's a little more straightforward question from Sherry asking, do you have a bibliography?
Yes, so I have included sources and image links here on my slides, and I'm happy to provide those after the presentation, absolutely. But actually, let me just leave those up. And then again, my email is Jennifer with 2 N's .Staton, S-T-A-Y-T-O-N, at unt.edu. And I encourage you to follow up with me. I'm happy to point you to these resources and others that I found useful as I continue to hone and adjust my own management skills.
Great, thanks. Another question asking how many hours a week would a student worker need to work to have these projects be successful? I have 5 student workers, but they never work at the same time and all work 10 to 15 hours or less a week.
So yeah, that again, part of the benefit of using flipped and agile management structures is that traditional waterfall project management can present real challenges when you have limited student schedules like that. But what flipped and agile allows you to do is to, again, use those tools and processes that work best for your team, whatever your needs are. So if you have students that can't work together, I would say that your first low-hanging fruit goal in your project is developing their virtual communication skills and getting them to communicate asynchronously with one another. So just one random thing that helped my students whenever we started working remotely is we had different templates and projects and things that we were working on, but we created a file naming convention so that we could tell who last edited a document and what day they edited it on. You know, just things like that. So figure out those structures that are going to enable your team to work better together, first of all, but enable you to creatively address problems that maybe traditional project management style says, oh, we can't do this project then. So, I mean, to me, that's one of the benefits of seeking out agile practices and thinking about these things and getting a group to think about and address these problems. Because while you may not be able to problem solve 15 hours a week, maybe if you give them all an hour a week, then you've got at least 5 students that are spending 5 hours a week trying to solve that problem.
Thanks. Another question that has come in is how do you advertise, market, and promote the projects which excite students to join?
So again, as their supervisor, you know, I'm more focusing on creating those projects. But as far as advertising their projects, I think that is one of the benefits to empowering your students throughout the course of the project. If the students are the ones that have created that session, if they've participated in creating that marketing, if they're managing your social media, then if you've already got them excited about that event before it occurs, then you don't have to remind them to schedule that post. If they're already involved as stakeholders on the ground floor of planning that event, then they're letting their friends know a week out, hey, why don't you come do this thing? I'm going to be here on Thursday night, you know? So at UNT, our students that give tours around campus are called ambassadors. But I think that that's a really interesting idea to try to cultivate within our projects is if our students are engaged, if our students are excited about our projects, then that actually makes our jobs for outreach and our jobs for engagement easier because they're talking to their fellow students and they're talking to the professors. And so it's basically like having, you know, amplifying the amount of megaphones we've got running around on campus.
And that's a nice segue to another question that has come in that says, our library tends to think in terms of tasks as opposed to projects. How do you help introduce these concepts into a group so that this can become the norm and not the exception? Does it work best starting in one department and then trying to move it into other departments?
Well, in my experience, I think this the culture change really happens both through roles and through communication. Like those are probably the 2 most critical aspects of changing a project management culture. So if you let people know that I want you in this role on a project because I see your expertise is this, and I hope that you'll be able to make this contribution to the project, then they know where they stand, even if you're asking them to do things that you've never asked them to do before. I think with students, that can almost be an easier sell than with staff sometimes. But again, we need to shift our focus to being student-centered. And everyone's job in the library should be teaching students and should be encouraging students. So if we can have all of our projects have that as the center focus, I think that really goes a long way into getting that buy-in. And I don't think it matters whether you start with one department, start small and let it, you know, kind of grassroots grow, or whether you want to, you know, change the culture quickly and try to do different things in different groups at the same time. I think the important thing is that students stay at the center of your message, and that, again, these new things that you're trying are rooted, excuse me, in those values of Agile, which is people and interactions over the process, over the tool.
Another question, one from looks like JB. Do you ever schedule informal team building activities before launching a project?
Yes, all the time. I don't think you can spend too much time on team building. I don't think you can have too many professional development opportunities for students. I think it is a great idea to do things that have nothing to do with your team and everything to do with your team members. So yeah, I think that if they know each other, then that's just less work that you have to do when you're building that trust that is essential. If they know that they can fail with each other as well as fail with you as their supervisor, then you guys can really start doing some exciting stuff. But there has to be that freedom to make mistakes. There has to be that trust that these people are still going to respect me, you know, and honor my individuality, whether or not they agree with me in the course of this project.
Great, thanks. I can tackle this next question, which is asking about recording and certificate. Just to remind everyone, the recording will be posted to the ACRL Together Wherever webpage. So all the recordings for all the webinars this week will be posted there in about a business day or so you can check there. And if people need a certificate, I will put my email in the chat. This is Margot with ACRL, and you can just email me to request that. So I'll just pop that in the chat. And I think I had caught the questions that had come in to date, but if I missed your question, please add it back to the chat so we can make sure we address any comments or questions. All right, I'm seeing lots of thank yous and kudos for Jen's presentation today. Again, if you have any final questions or comments, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us today.
For having me. It was a real honor to get to speak to you all. Can I
It
go
was
ahead and
really
stop
great.
sharing? as well?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, you can go ahead and stop sharing. And I think Lois has either paused or can stop the recording.